6:03, do you want to get started?
Yeah.
Start with pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I am not a voting member, I am not a member of the committee. I just will announce we have two members that are serving, that are participating hybrid, William Gifford and Mark Schmidt. And I think if you want to just go around the room and introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. Cindy Brown, I'm a member of the, sorry. I'm Cindy Brown, I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I am an at-large member for purposes of this committee.
I'm Christopher Thrasher, also an at-large member.
Manny Soers, Selectman.
Bob Rebello, I'm a resident in town here, and I'm on the long-term building committee.
John Perry, I guess I'm an at-large member.
So the first item on the agenda is to reorganize the committee, chair, vice chair, and clerk. Anybody interested in chair?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Schmidt.
I second that.
Mr. Schmidt, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Well, I'll put up a motion to have Mark Schmidt as chairman of the long-term building committee. Anyone care to second? There
I'll
you
second
go.
that.
Will you accept that, Mark?
Yes, I do.
Great, okay. I guess I'll,
See all of you. Is the whole committee there?
Everybody but Bill Gifford. Bill Gifford is remote. We are missing Ann Boxler, Sean Leach, and Tony Viveris.
Right, so there's not a full, but there is a quorum.
There is a quorum. Did we get a vote?
Well,
We have a
Well,
motion and a
let's-
second.
yep, so we'll get a vote.
Any discussion on the motion?
All those in favor?
We need to do a roll call.
Roll call because we're doing hybrid, okay. Cindy Brown, aye.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Manny Soers, aye.
Bob Rebello, aye.
John Perry, aye.
Bill Gifford, aye.
Mark Schmidt. Abstain?
Yeah, I'm gonna stay.
So that motion passes. We have a motion for vice chair.
I'd like to volunteer for that.
I'll second that, if that's a motion. I'll motion that Manny Soers be made vice chair.
And I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? Can we get a roll call vote?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Bob Rebello, aye.
John Perry, aye.
Bill?
Mark Schmidt, aye. Bill Gifford, aye.
That motion passes. We have a clerk. Anybody interested? I will be the clerk for today, but I'd like to relinquish that duty after tonight's meeting.
Perhaps if... I'd be happy to...
I'll nominate Christopher Thrasher as clerk.
Second.
Cindy Brown, aye.
Manny Soers, aye.
Bob Rebello, aye.
John Perry, aye.
John Leach, aye.
Bill Gifford, aye. Mark Schmidt, aye.
That motion passes. Mark, are you gonna run the meeting from here on out? You're in a car.
I can, I'm a little bit handicapped, I'm sorry, everyone. I'm returning from a visit to the vet with our dog. So I don't even have the, I don't have the agenda in front of me. I will do it if you tell me what the next agenda item is.
So the next agenda item is approve the minutes of January 25th, 2023. Copies of the minutes are here before the board.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 25th?
I'll move we approve the minutes of January 23rd. 25th, I'm sorry, January 25th, 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, let's see, how do we do this? By a roll call
Roll call vote.
Cindy Brown, aye.
I believe I'll abstain.
I'll also abstain. I wasn't at that meeting.
I was there.
John Perry, aye.
And Bob Ferguson.
Bill Gifford. Ron Leach, aye.
vote? Okay, and Mark Schmidt, aye. So the minutes are approved. What is the next item?
The next item says review May 2nd, 2023 warrant article. I can include that in the update on the project status. That would help. I'm gonna put up on the screen.
Yeah.
Move next if you can.
So just an update as to where we are with the old high school on Main Road. On the website itself, the Long-Term Building Planning Committee website, there's a number of reports. Most of these reports were done when the high school was reevaluated for a new school. I can tell you what reports are on there in a minute. There's also an appraisal on the site. There's a reuse study that was done by Utile Architects, and a follow-up study that was done by Utile Architects. And there's also an appraisal that's on that website. And there's a link listed here, but that can be found on the town Long-Term Building Committee website. Like I said, there's a number of reports that have been done, and these are fairly comprehensive reports, at least that were done for the feasibility study in 2016. We have reports on the electrical, environmental, for the site, structural, the fire components of the high school. They did a hazmat report. They have information on the property itself. They evaluated the HVAC system, the plumbing system. They also looked at traffic impacts, mainly related to a new school, but it did have information on the existing structure. You also see the 2020 adaptive reuse study. This was done by Utile Architects. They updated that study in 2022, and there's an appraisal there from 2022. So there's quite a bit of information. All this information is available on the website. If anybody has trouble accessing it or finding it, let me know and we'll make it available to them. As part of the Utile study, they looked at the existing building. There's some discussion. Their main study process was to look to see if we were to move municipal offices in that building, what would the feasibility be, how much space would be needed, how big the existing building is, etc. So this whole block here, can you see this on your screens?
I can't see it, Jim, but I did see it. I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah, I did too, and it's gone.
Went through it.
Give me a minute here.
Almost. Yeah, now I'm seeing it,
Yep,
but
I do too.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So the existing building is 155,000 square feet. Utile Architects looked at the town hall, the senior center, town hall annex, the school administration and extended day program. And And they got the existing square footage of each one of those buildings. So those are shown here. You can see that there's about, geez, between those uses, that would take up about 20%. Yeah,
We lost it again.
I'm not sure why that's doing that.
Okay.
All right. So if you look at the proposed uses, that municipal uses that can occupy that space, you're looking at about 20% of the overall building. They proposed in their proposal that portion of the building would have to be torn down if it was to be used for municipal uses, even if these municipal uses expanded or doubled. They pointed out in their report that any change in the use category, so if it's going from educational use to office use, could trigger code improvements, which would be fire protection, handicap accessibility,
Jimmy, could I
structural changes, sure.
question on that? So change of use, but I've noticed that some other towns have been doing mixed use in these buildings. So we've never moved out, you know, the school admin's still in there. So I don't think that would apply to us on a change of use. And I mean, the existing, so these other departments that need space, they need more space now, so I don't think it's very representative of what they're taking up right now. And again, recreation could gymnasium, auditorium, the fields, well, that's a large part of the property already. Cafeteria, council on aging, food pantry. I mean, you're sucking up the building pretty fast. School administration's still in there. I had heard some talk about them looking for some adult education. I mean, I think that would be something they could bring into that facility along with the municipal offices. So my feeling is I think we can move in without very little. And then areas in the building that we need to upgrade, you know, I mean, we're spending a lot of grant money on these buildings we got right now. We can look to upgrade those areas. We never moved out, so we just continue our use. That's my feeling.
So that'd make a big difference, right, if we could move in there without any improvements. I'm just going by what the Utah architect said. They had a code compliance officer get involved with the report.
We get a lot of studies, and we pay for a lot of studies, and we never follow them. So I don't.
So who would make that determination? So who could we go to?
Our building
With-
inspector.
That's right, building inspector.
The building inspector would be.
So on commercial buildings like this, the building inspector usually requires a code.
You'd have to go to the
report.
state. You couldn't go to the local building inspector.
You think you'd have to go to the state?
Unfortunately, I'm an architect, so
Okay.
I've been through this on other buildings. I've spent a lot of time reviewing this thing. And the two key things are, the building doesn't meet the earthquake code. And I think you're going to get forced into doing that.
Could you speak
Yeah.
louder, please? Could you speak louder?
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things the building doesn't do is meet the earthquake code, which is now a relatively new code. And I think, from everything I know, from everything I've read here, you're going to be forced to do that if you reuse that thing. It's not the end of the world. It could be done, but there's a real cost implication there.
What kind of cost would be included? What kind of cost would that entail?
That's if it was considered a change of use?
I think you're going to be forced into it anyway, for a couple of reasons. What parent or anybody's going to want somebody in that building when they know that it's deficient? Just like if it's deficient from a fire point of view. I think that's a key thing that you have to consider in this.
I'm
So,
sorry, what parent, say that again, please?
I'm sorry.
I didn't hear what you said. What parent would,
Well, I think any parent that found out that you're going to be reusing this building that doesn't come up to code would be correct. They'd be all over you.
we didn't close the school because it wasn't up to code, though.
Absolutely
We're
not.
still using the code.
But-
And if I'm correct, I think the school's currently being
Would you state your
used.
name, please?
Michelle Stones. The school's currently being used now for something with kids now, is that correct?
Yes. Extended day.
It's being used now with children in school.
I'm sure it is, and we vote there. And maybe they're using the gymnasium, I don't know. But I know when you formally go to do that, you're gonna be running up against that. And you can't go to the local building inspector, you're gonna be going to the State Building Code Commission. And there's gonna be somebody who's gonna say, you can't do that.
Well, I think we should find out if we need to go to the State Building Code Commission first. We're not, I don't think we're going for a change of use. This has been done throughout the state in
I'm
plenty
sure
of
it has.
buildings, the same exact building.
So at
Built the
this
same
point-
criteria.
At this point, I'm not advocating one way or another, I'm just presenting what the information that we have. I think we're gonna have to go through this whole thought
Yep.
process and use process as we move forward. So the existing square footage that we have is about 20% of the entire building. It's agreed that in some cases, like the senior center and maybe the school admin and extended day, they're gonna want more square footage, so that could be doubled, right? It could be up to 40% of the building. When they looked at it, they were not looking at, the report did not include soup kitchens and that type of stuff, so that could take up more of the building as well. I will say from the reports that we have, they indicated that we would have to bring the building up to today's code. And it was based on a few things. Wasn't sure about the earthquake, but the cost of the improvements that you put in triggers it. The use change can trigger it.
Yep.
Whether or not they were right, that's not for me to decide. That's just what it said in the report. I just kind of wanted to point that out. This is a big building. It's 155,000 square feet.
Can I ask a question? The codes you're talking about money outside of what's in this potential use, this little graph we have here, or you're talking about
Actually, I'm
that's
not
included
sure
in
what-
there?
This is just a spatial type
Okay.
graph. I just
So the
wanted to-
code money you're talking about gets added to these
Yeah,
line
I don't know
items.
how many of you have read this thing, it's quite detailed, and Landvest did a terrific job of analyzing those potential costs, and they're dramatic, they really are. Now, you could say, all right, we're not gonna do all of the building, we're gonna tear part of it down. Well, that changes the whole formula. I don't know what the answer is. I just know from reading this that it's a really complicated, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, and that's why this committee's here, to see if we can make some sense out of it.
So you're an architect, so you're aware of the big code changes that are coming up right now?
I try to keep up.
Well, I mean, those code changes will make the high school we just built out of code.
Absolutely.
So I don't think we need to be scaring about a building we're still using and having to do those upgrades, but, and I don't think we're gonna have to go to the state. I mean, obviously, a building in this magnitude, all right, so our building inspector is not qualified to assess this building. So then we hire an architect to assess the building.
Well, yeah,
I mean, I think we could, with the money that we got in this warrant, that's probably the next step if we're looking for it. And again, what I'm hearing on the street, I just ran for selectman, I got people coming up to me all the time. I've been on the planning board for 3 years, and the community wants the building. They're still using it. We go by there on Saturdays and it's being used, so I don't want to be scaring people, they're calling me saying it's gonna cost $26 million to renovate it for municipal offices, and I don't believe that's a fact. So that's all I'm trying to get at.
just to interject, since we're way off your
Yeah.
agenda, I think some of the money that you got $200,000 here,
Yes.
I think some of it should definitely be used to really get a good handle on the code implications of the various options you have here.
Agreed.
And then the next step is, okay, what are each one of those things gonna cost? Because I will guarantee you there's options here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
The problem is here, I think we should start with the local building inspector. Local building inspector has some things that he's not able to do. We go to the state inspector, who is always available. I had his telephone number, I used to call him quite often. He was there all the time. And if he can't answer the question, then you go right to the state board. Now, to bring in architects and all of these people, it's just like I cut grass and you show me your field with all the grass. My answer to that is pay me and I'll cut the grass. Now, if you hire somebody else, they'll charge you to cut the grass. The building inspector is not in that particular frame. You call me in as an engineer or you call me in as an architect, many times I have different answers. Now, I don't mean that they're different in terms of safety in the building and so on. I just mean that you look at a building and you look at it in terms of, we need to change it. I think we want our building inspector to answer our questions, to get involved, take a look at it and give his opinion. His opinion is important. Argue with him if you please. As you argue with him, then we ask the state inspector, or he does, and the state inspector is very good and will be very happy, I can speak for him, come and take a look and give you his impression. And there are others above him. Now, these are the same people that are going to also say to the architect later on, wait a minute, we don't approve this, or we do or we don't. So you might get to that point, but to have the building inspectors take you to that point if it's necessary, I think is very important. We're jumping around here and saying, let's ask the President of the United States if it's all right, rather than starting and bringing information to that level.
Yeah, wait a minute, let me just, it's a little hard to run a meeting when I'm remote here, but what I don't want to do is go back through, I mean, Bill has been on this committee much longer than I have, and there's a couple others I can't see who've been on it, and I've been on it a few years, and we've gone around in circles. We've had a series of reports done. There's a lot of information out there, and assessments, and we've had appraisals of the building and all that. Well, I thought that the purpose of reconstituting this committee was to hire, and I don't know who this entity is or what sort of entity it should be or person, to take us through this, because as a committee, it's very hard. We've got different views on things and we have different fields of expertise. But I think we need, did we not at the town meeting appropriate a certain amount of money? Was it up to, did I hear the figure $200,000 to hire a consultant?
That's correct.
Yeah. So isn't that, Jim Hartnett, isn't that our next step here is before we start going around in circles about what everybody thinks should be done to the building, to focus on who we should retain, what kind of a firm or individual it is who can we bring this to a conclusion where we can present it to the town for a vote, but not right now. We've got a series of ideas that have been out there, but we need some organization or individual.
We need to work through the building inspector, though. Even when we built the new high school, when they got into a real jam, they had to have the building inspector come in and say yes or no. He's the one that allowed people to be in the building. Am I right about this, Jim, or am I off on left field?
Yes, I can certainly ask the building inspector his opinion on this. That's not an issue. I'll do that before the next meeting.
But I agree with Mark in that I think the whole purpose of this is that, there are many members of the committee, members have changed over the years, and it was to come to some final work product resolution as to what the recommendation of this committee is. The recommendation that we verbally gave to the Board of Selectmen last year was that we wanted to retain, as a group, we voted that we wanted to retain the building and investigate what its best use would be and how we could accommodate that. But none of us here, most of us work full-time jobs or not, or we're not equipped to develop the kind of report and the analysis that's necessary to come up with the final plan. And that would involve consulting with a building inspector, whether it be a local one or a state one. But we need someone to be able to manage that process, and that's really what the initial part of that $200,000 was for, was to have a consultant manage this process for us. Because we don't have any single person here that can manage this process on a I don't want to say full-time, but on a regular basis that's going to stay on top of who's gonna coordinate with what unless we plan on meeting here once a week? You know, this is just a committee that receives the information, but I don't think that we are capable of putting together a professional report with all of the bells and whistles identified that need to be attached. And that's why we need a professional consultant to come in and manage this process for us, because we're not capable of doing that. Jim has a full-time job already. Jim cannot manage this process throughout all of these things because he's busy enough already. And so the town was generous enough to give us the $200,000 to investigate what needs to be done to that nth degree, to find out what kinds of codes need to be addressed, or perhaps they don't. But none of us individually can answer that question.
No, but the state building inspectors can. And I don't think we should spend $200,000 until we have a building inspector right up through the state lines that says, no, you cannot use that building as it exists. If they tell us we can use it as it exists, we're moving in. If we can't use it, then we have to make the changes, or we have to do something else.
So I think, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I think at this point it would probably be appropriate to let Mr. Hartnett finish the presentation that's based on the studies that have already been done, and then we can move on to the next steps, part of the agenda. I do have some ideas, and I know other members of the committee have ideas as well, as far as what would be the best process for developing, first of all, just developing exactly what it is that this committee wants to accomplish during the time that we're here. So I'm just asking, at this point, could we let Mr. Hartnett finish the proposal, or not the proposal, but the presentation, and then go from there? Would that be appropriate at this time?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. My apologies, Jim, I didn't realize you had a whole presentation there.
It's just a couple more slides, that's all. And this is just factual based. This is the information that I had before. I'm not pushing one project over another. That's up for the committee and the town to decide. This is just in a recommendation that was done to the long-term building committee last year. We looked at some different options. These are very raw estimates based on the information that was submitted by the architect and the code compliance officer, and they also had an estimating company review the estimates. There's different options. You could sell the school, you could use it for municipal uses. Affordable housing has been one. We could keep the property, demolish the school, and you know, there's different prices with each one. I will say that the prices that I used from their report was like $520 a square foot 2-3 years ago. That's up over $800 a square foot now. So while I think as comparison-wise, these numbers still have some meaning, but overall these numbers are going to change substantially. You know, there's a do-nothing option, just continue with what we're doing, and the admin offices can use it, and they can use it for whatever the after-school programs. Our cost for FY '23, heating was about $70,000, electric was $22,000, equipment and repairs was $20,000, miscellaneous charges and expenses were $36,000, insurance was $67,000. This did not include any major repairs. We have a well that's going to need a new pump and have to be pulled. That was supposed to be done last year, but it was pushed off to this next fiscal year. It doesn't include a lot of the other costs: custodial staff, telephone, cable internet, snow plowing, repairs, landscaping, field maintenance. A lot of those costs are picked up by the school department. So there is a cost to keeping this building. And we're only using about 6 or 7% of the building at this time.
Excuse me, is it correct that we can't sell it any longer? Wasn't that removed from the last town meeting?
It was removed from, no, it can be sold. It was authorized, the Board of Selectmen were authorized at the previous town meeting to
But
dispose of
I thought we removed the word sell from the article at the last town meeting,
You did, but that doesn't prevent them from selling
so we
it.
can still sell
You can still sell it, absolutely.
it. Is that, I mean,
This is the wording from the town meeting, so.
okay. Tonight there was a meeting. The agenda was not shared. And what is on the agenda, so the people that are here tonight are people through word of mouth, because we made phone calls to get people here. So reading the minutes, and it states that you're against keeping the building. So it makes me feel like you purposely did not have the agenda sent out. And if anyone did read the agenda, it doesn't even say that we're going to be speaking of the high school. I mean,
Can I say something? Can I
Yeah.
say something? Where is all this negative energy coming from?
Agenda?
Because nothing at all has moved forward. Nothing has been decided. I, in all honesty, have an issue with the fact that this has been going on for 2 to 3 years and nothing has been done.
I agree.
I'm kind of done with the negative energy. I saw it all day long on Facebook, and I want to know where it's coming from. There has been no decisions of any kind made.
But can you read?
Everybody has an open mind right here.
Can you
But-
read the agenda and tell me how the town people are supposed to know that that's what they were gonna come here to speak about?
To
I
be,
just think
this is,
everybody needs an agenda.
to me, this is the first meeting of this committee. This is a whole new committee. It's a whole new group of people.
Okay.
I had, to be honest, I had no idea as a member of the committee what I was doing, but I was okay with that. Because to be honest with you, it needs to be open. It needs to start again.
It does need to be open.
It's never gonna start.
First of all, don't raise your voice, it's unnecessary.
Could I have some order here? I think what we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit on this. And Jim, first of all, did you have other slides to show us?
I think that was it. This
Okay.
is just the article itself that was approved at the town meeting.
All right, because what I really want to,
Wording revised. It may not include the revised wording, I don't think it does, that was in the motion.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The wording I
The-
have here does not include the revised wording that was approved at the town meeting, that was in the actual motion.
Yep.
If someone needs to speak, they should go to the microphone too. State their name.
But- is this, so I'm sorry, are there members of the public there?
Yes.
All right, but I will let you speak in a minute. I just want to sort of corral our committee here and stay on topic, and then we can open it up to the public. So, Jim, this is your last slide, is next steps. We need to select, do we select a project manager? And are there going to be additional studies and public participation? I mean, yes, I mean, my own answer on this is that $200,000 was to us, as the woman who, I'm sorry, I can't identify you, said very clearly that we have to hire a consultant. And and that's where I need the help of the committee to help identify who that consultant would be. And then we will, at that point, discuss with the consultant the need for additional studies, and certainly there will be public participation. This is going to be completely transparent, and I didn't want to get into any, well, I didn't expect to be elected the chair here, but I didn't want to get into any of the substance of it yet. This is more an organizational meeting. So with that, can I ask if there are thoughts among the committee members about who is most appropriate to lead this? What sort of a company, what sort of consultant?
Mr. Chair, if I may, before identifying which consultant or who to pay, I think it's really important that this committee identifies specifically what it needs to accomplish. And to that end, I've got a few thoughts on that. I think the very first thing that is necessary is the committee needs to identify specific scenarios for analysis by both this committee and the site and any site study or consulting. Specific scenarios regarding the old high school, as well as additional, or the town's facilities and buildings in totality. I think the second step is to identify requirements for an RFP to seek a consultant that would consider multiple options of not just scenarios, but conversion options that include either demolishing part of the structure or don't. I think that was one of the key, I don't necessarily want to say flaws, but I think that's one of the deficiencies in the studies that have been done previously, is that there are not multiple options given as to what the reuse could be. And once that is, once a consultant is identified and such a study takes place, I think it's very key that the committee performs a full cost-benefit analysis of not only what it would cost to do X, Y, and Z, whichever scenario, but also that takes into account the costs that are going to be coming up for any things that need to be done with other town buildings. I think the only way to realistically look and evaluate the choices that the committee would have is to make sure that those numbers, whether it's additional funding needed for repair, or whether it's the possibility of putting buildings back on the tax rolls, that it has to be a holistic approach. You have to, in order to get an accurate figure, you have to look at everything. And so that's kind of my thought as far as what this committee should do. So again, the first step would just be to identify specific scenarios for the committee and for any consultant to analyze. So.
But would you agree that once assessing some of those, we would need to have a professional come in and do those? I mean, we are not of the capability, even collectively, to come up with a proper work product that we could even use to advance.
I would agree that there certainly needs to be professional involvement, but I do think the first step is identifying what we want out of professional.
I think that the scenarios, had been laid out in broad terms. You sell the school completely, you adapt it for municipal use, or including the map that Jim had included as to what departments could be included in there. Municipal office buildings, council on aging, et cetera, additional school use, or affordable housing. So, this committee in its past versions have assessed what options we would have.
So what I'm looking for specifically, I think, would not only be the overall scenarios, but even, like I said, within the possibility of converting the building to some other use. Are there multiple things that we would like a consultant to analyze? So again, I go back to the study. The updated study talks about demolishing the certain parts of the building, including the auditorium, the gymnasium, and it may well be that is what makes sense. But what I would like to see to be able to evaluate truly the figures is what it would cost for other scenarios as far as the building.
Oh, I
goes.
totally agree, but I think that also is something that a consultant would help us with.
I
We
could
have
agree
been
that.
spinning around in
with that,
circles
for
for
sure.
3 years because we don't have a leader, a professional leader to pull us all together into the next step. We have been swimming around this hole for 3 years, and we haven't gotten anywhere because we have no way to make that next step.
So are you thinking in terms of going immediately towards a project manager type, or is that,
To guide us through.
what, the only concern I would have with immediately doing that is just making sure that, the mandate from the town meeting is $200,000. So that is, that's the ceiling we're looking at. So the question is, what's the best use of that? And we, want to make sure it doesn't get, it's not all out the door before anything. So that's my only concern with that, I guess.
I totally agree. We would have to be very careful how that $200,000 was spent.
I would like to just speak briefly on
Sure.
that. And I agree with a lot of the stuff that you said. We've spent a lot of money already, and it's been 3 years, and like you said, we're swimming in a circle. We do need a project manager, but I think possibly before we get to that point, just like walking through with the building inspector and going in that direction, we need to determine really what we want to do with it before we hire the project manager, instead of like all this hypothetical stuff we have in here. Say, okay, this is what the taxpayers want to do with this building.
Right.
Now, how do we move forward?
Right.
But instead of just, we were looking for a tax override because we need funds. We have 200,000. would like to see that to be the final 200,000 before we do something with this building instead of go another 3 years.
Right.
Did I say something?
Well, why don't we try to put down a list of potential, we don't have to do this in the meeting, but if everybody would submit, I don't know if we can do this or this has to be an open meeting, but can we have, I guess, a list of ideas? What would people like to, as you just mentioned, the various options for that building? What would you like to see? And if we could get a list, maybe it ends up being 5 different possibilities that make the most sense, and maybe it's a list of 10 or 15. But I'd like to start with getting this committee's thoughts on what uses they would like to have this consultant look into. And then I think we need to narrow that down and then put out an RFP, as was just mentioned, identify a consultant, bring them on board and say, this is what we think the program is for this building. And then they can go from there.
Great.
All right, I think John Perry had something.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts on this. In another life, I've done this kind of stuff, this project manager stuff. I no longer want to do that again. But here's a couple things to think about. One of them is I spent some time before I moved down here in the Boston area doing architecture and planning work. And I remember the town of Newton, which went whole hog getting rid of their schools. But they had the brains to mothball them and board them up. And guess what? Population grew, they needed more classroom spaces, and they now, I just was talking to somebody today who lives in Newton, they said they opened all those schools back up. I think one of the things that needs to be done here is an analysis for the next 5 to 10 years. What are the possibilities of growth in this town? I'm not convinced you may not need that school.
That's right.
Before we do anything and turn it into landfill or whatever the hell is being contemplated, or 25 houses, I think you'll never have a definitive answer of what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years, but I think you get some better answers and some ranges, and then plug those ranges into the kinds of things we're talking about here of options. The second thing I would say is $200,000 doesn't go very far with a consultant.
Right.
So my concern is, unfortunately, if this committee wants to get something done, you can get a consultant, but this committee's going to have to do some of the work. There's no way around it. Either that or get a new committee, frankly.
All right, well,
I think Sean Leach had his hand up.
Yeah, I think we also need to consider the separation of the grounds and the school itself as possible assessment of holding on to the land for whatever possible future use that could be, as opposed to building and grounds as all one entity. Because I can foresee that we're going to need, just by looking at what's going on already, those playing fields as part of the school that we've just built, to have enough room to do what we need to do. So I think that's a whole different scenario to consider. And finally, I think it's hard to hire a consultant when there's no consensus as to what the town wants to do. And I use the town metaphorically as what the town people want to do, or what this committee wants to do, or what, because we have to do something. It's a financial burden right now. People have to understand that, because you go, 200 people vote at town meeting to give $200,000, but there's 16,000 people that don't know what's going on with this building. So I think it really needs to be out there that essentially, this has to do something in the real short term very quickly, or it's just a financial burden. Whether we knock it down and level it and then consider what we do with the grounds or whatever, but I just foresee that $200,000 this year, turns into $250 next year, and $300 the year after that, and we're not getting state aid in the same way that this is gonna cost the town.
You have someone from the public that wants to speak to.
How many people think that we should save the building for the town's use versus selling it? Do most, just raise hands, so how many people think we ought to keep the building?
Can I interject something? You're asking on a vote when you don't know what you're voting on.
Yeah, well, no, this is just an informal polling of, based on the very, introductory discussion of this, because I want to get a sense of, I mean, there may be people who think, we don't want to take this any further, we should do the best and put it on the market and sell it right away. But, so just by show of hands, how many people think that we ought to retain the building for some use, municipal use, and not sell it?
I think it's very, very hard to make that kind of comment without seeing, simply without seeing the numbers that you're actually.
Oh, well, I know that.
Like, in a perfect world, we don't raise taxes and that turns into the Taj Mahal Town Hall or something, but realistically, we have to look at what it's going to cost to do whatever it is, even if it is just hang on to it. So I think, I will say this, from what I have read in the appraisals, the appraisal report, I'm very concerned that not only would that $11 million figure not actually be indicative of what the building and grounds would actually get on the market, but I'm also concerned when even the appraisal report says the highest and best use would be a school or other nonprofit. Well, then that doesn't do us any good on property taxes either. So there's certainly some concerns with, and also, of course, you're looking at what, $2 million, probably more than that at this point for demolition costs if the town was to take it upon themselves to demolish it. So my inclination is towards trying to figure out a way to use the building, but it's really hard to make that kind of decision without seeing the numbers in front of you.
Mr. Chair,
All right, yes, Jim.
just a suggestion, when we were looking at putting money into the town meeting warrant for a study, one of the thoughts was, and we realize there's a strong sentiment here in town, to keep the building for municipal uses. So if we want to do that, we need to evaluate that option, right? We have to see if it's feasible, and we have to see what the costs are. And when we do that, we have to look at the other buildings as well. What would the cost of this building be, the annex, and other things that would have to be upgraded, so that we have a fair comparison. And I think that's something that we're going to have to do before we go much further, because it's just a strong sentiment here that that's what we should do. And maybe it is, but until we know what the numbers are and the feasibility of it, we're just spinning our wheels. And I think that's something a consultant can do fairly easy. They can evaluate the use needs that we have for the different buildings. They can give us a rough estimate to bring this building up to code, and they can give us an estimate as to what it would cost to move into the high school.
Right. Well, basically, that's a sort of a redo of what UTIL has done for us.
Agreed.
Correct?
Agreed. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence in the UTIL report. So how do we get over that hump? How do we convince people that either that report is correct or we get other information that says it is not correct? And I guess that's...
How about if we talk to the building inspector.
Right.
We
Yeah.
talk to Four Rivers building inspector. We have them come over here and have a meeting. I mean, Four Rivers dealt with a lot of these school issues. Four Rivers buying a school from a charter school right now.
But they're going to use it as a school.
Educational
Right.
uses.
Again,
So-
we still got
so if-
admin in there. We still got other uses. Like I said, there's other communities that have used them for mixed uses. There's a couple, we could reach out to that community with that building inspector. Bring him in here.
I've been on this committee since it started. Myself and Bill Gifford were the two that started the committee, only two of us. We knocked this around since then, and the school thing, we've been knocking it around for a few years. We keep talking about the same thing. This is too much money, that's too much money. We don't know how much money. I've been saying that since day one. The only way to do it right is like everybody's talking, like I used to be a building inspector. You have to start with those people. They're gonna make the rules. They're gonna tell you what they have to do. They're gonna make the decisions. So you start here at the local building inspector. If you have to go to Boston, you end up in Boston. But then you're gonna know if you have to do certain things, that what the cost is gonna be to do them. Right now, you're just guessing at all these numbers. We don't have any idea what it's gonna cost to do this or that until you find out if you have to do it. That's where you're gonna go with the building inspectors. You're gonna get some information that you can use to come up with some numbers. Right now, we don't have, we've had these people come in and assess the building and other things. How many times, how much money we spent in the last 3 years on people like that, or 5 years? It's crazy. It's all wasted. As far as I'm concerned, it's wasted money, because they're giving you their opinion about what's happening. Nobody's talked to any of the building inspectors. Nobody's gone to Boston. We don't know for sure what we have to do. That's my opinion.
I have a suggestion here for the committee. If, taking into account that most of us work and have plenty of other things on our plates, we have architects, we have builders on this committee. I think that if we were to all come up with lists of either factors that need to be, basically what factors would go into a cost-benefit analysis, what factors would need to be taken into account once we go to a consultant. That would be my suggestion, is that we try as a committee to come up with this as soon as possible.
I've been here a while, and I've been to consultants, I've been to people tell you what this, tell you that. None of them are working with information for sure. This is what we want. Tell us what it's gonna cost. None of them. I've been here for a long time doing this. We haven't had a consultant or anybody else come right down. We haven't told them exactly what we want. They're picking numbers out of the air. They're picking who's gonna do it, what we're gonna use it for. This has been going on for 3 years.
They're all best at sending you a bill.
Well, we did, out of fairness, we did have UTIL, we told UTIL, what will it cost to relocate the municipal offices from the town hall and the town hall annex? And I think we said, included the council on aging, et cetera. What will it cost to transfer them to this building? And we had that study done. So we gave them an assignment, and as I think Jim Hartnett just said, I think there's still some question as to whether the numbers that they came up with were valid, and so at the risk of repeating the exercise, I don't see any other way. We need to bring in a consultant. I agree, we need to first agree on what we want to task them with doing, what uses we can agree on would be make the most sense for the town and be in the best interests of the voters. And then hire the consultant and say, go ahead and tell us what you think the cost will be.
Somebody here that wants to speak?
Matt Medeiros, the study's showing you at most cost, it's not showing you at best cost. So at best, you don't have to change of use, you don't have to do any demo, it could
Right.
cost nothing and we can move in for nothing tomorrow. And I think that's a lot, nobody said at best yet. It's a municipality, that's kind of what I do, I build schools, all that, I'm a commercial carpenter, I'm in the carpenters union. I don't think you're gonna have to change of use. It's a municipality, you're still using it. I think it's gonna be under a category, so I think you just need to find out whether it's the building inspector, like you guys said, but I don't think you need a consultant to tell you that. The study's good. I don't think you need to demo what the consultant says. You could, but it's money that we don't need to spend, I don't think. You could vote on it if you really wanted to. I don't think it's useful, but
Makes sense to me.
I just think at best, the studies at worst could cost 29 million or 27 million, but if at best it could cost nothing if they say, you know what, it's a municipality, move in.
Yep.
You don't have to do anything. Building inspectors say, yeah, it's same use, get in. So I think that should
First step.
get.
And sometimes when you go to the
You
state,
gotta start there.
when you go to the state, he changes the building inspector's mind and says, yes, they can move in.
Yeah,
Yep, and cost nothing.
That's right.
All right. So Jim is going to be in touch with Ralph, our building inspector, and ask him for his opinion about all this?
Right.
Is that right?
I don't mind nepotism, do you? I just as soon have the building inspector give us his opinion. Hasn't been done. I've been doing this for 10 years. Been through all the buildings, we've written all sorts of things. Bob will attest to this, and I'm sure Jim hasn't been around as long as we've been doing. I guess you have been, you're on the planning board. But we've been doing this for years and years. New people come on the committee, and I'm sorry, it is a bit humorous in that they start to ask all the questions that were asked 5 or 6 years ago. It goes over and over and over. So finally, there's people like Sean who nicely come to see us once in a while and hears the same story over and over and over. He knows we should keep the building. A lot of us do. 20 years from now, I won't be around, but you'll be all crying the blues. Why did we get rid of that building right in the middle of town?
All right. So it seems to me our next step then is to have the opinion of at least one building inspector. We can have our own building inspector. I think I heard Manny, was it, suggested the Fall River building inspector?
Actually, one of them lives in Westport.
Say it again?
One of the building inspectors in Fall River actually lives in Westport.
All right. Well, Manny, would you
reach out to him.
coordinate that?
Yep.
All right. So I think, first of all, is there anybody else from the public who wants to speak? And Sean Leach still has his hand raised. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'll reiterate what Bill said. I've only been on this for 2 years now, and I've been intermittent because of my work schedule, but it seems like we're talking about the same thing over and over again. And it's time to, I'll put it nice, fish or cut bait. And, you know, you got to do something. I think you should keep the building. I think you should keep the grounds, because once you give it away, you can't decide you want it back 5 years from now. And I know that a couple of buildings, the town wished they may have kept the thing. I think you have to keep. The cost to put up a new municipal building, new town hall, or a new whatever, senior center or whatever, would be extraordinarily more expensive than keeping this building. However, we have to make a decision to commit to the building and do it.
Okay. So, anyway, I think what I'd like to wrap up the meeting unless anybody else has any more things they want to say at this point. But our next steps, the most immediate steps, is to get the opinion of a couple of building inspectors. Is there anything else we should be doing for our next step?
Yeah, don't insult our own building inspector by getting another one from another town to come in. What, is he incompetent? I think he's been around quite a while and done a good job for Westport. Let's have him come in and take a look. We can get other guys to give a second opinion. But that's like telling your doctor, I'm not really listening to what you're saying because I got this other doctor that's going to tell me what I want to hear.
Well, I think on that part, the building inspectors, they're all kind of in an association together. They like to work together. They talk back and forth. The Fall River building inspector has a lot more buildings of this caliber than what our building inspector has. And I think he would welcome the assistance from...
I like that way of thinking. What I'm talking about is separating them and asking them to come in.
No, I'd like them to get together and yeah, no.
That's great.
Okay. All right, so who's going to coordinate that?
2 more comments, I think one from John and one from Bob.
I'm just going to reiterate this business about, do we need this building going forward? So one option I would suggest is maybe getting the superintendent of schools to sit in on here and discuss what they see going forward with demand for school space. Because before we did anything with that school, we ought to decide we don't need it anymore. And I'm not convinced you don't need it. But,
yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion. So for our next meeting, let's try, someone would invite Mr. Aubin, is that his name? To
Mark, maybe he would speak a little briefly. Would you like?
What's that?
He's present. Maybe we could get him to speak.
Oh, Well, all right, I'm sorry.
You have anything?
Do you want me to get up?
Yes, please.
Geez, I'm pretty excited. For the first time, I was feeling a little bit of anonymity, and I was kind of enjoying that a little bit, you know. So, thank you for recognizing me. I get the frustration on the part of everybody. You know, I met with my building leadership today. Mr. Hartnett has asked departments to start the CIPC process early, so we have a list of you know, capital issues that we have relating to all of our buildings. And you know, and one of the things I wrote back to them is that, you know, it's very tough to say this is a priority when there are different priorities with different price tags on them in a community that is, you know, abhors spending tax money. So it's a challenge in that. For example, I had mentioned the fact that, you know, we have a water tank right now over at the Macumber School that is original, 1956. It's still working, but at some point do we, you know, need to get proactively ahead of that. When you go to the west, you know, you're looking at doors and windows that are original, 1977. That becomes an issue as well. And so as I'm listening to the debates going on, there are so many things going through my head. Like, I think somewhere along the line as a community, we're going to decide, you know, looking at the older buildings, if you are going to move people into the new building, I would absolutely love that, because, you know, as I look at our past 3 years, despite what uninformed people in the community say, and they say it quite often that, you know, our numbers are declining. No, that's not in fact the case. Right now, our middle school lunches are actually at capacity right now. And that's a building that we opened up 2 years ago. Our high school right now is actually going to see an increase. I believe the increase, and I want to be careful because you don't count your, you know, your people until October 1st, but we're looking at an increase of 64 students next year. As I drive down Gifford Road and I drive down Sodom Road, I see these huge houses that are being built, and I keep thinking, these are not downsized homes. These are homes where families are going to be moving in at some point. And so as I look at that, and then I look at the fact that, you know, our middle school, the way we're breaking up practices right now is we're going to try and use our fields, and I want to thank Jim and Tony Viveris and all of us that have been on the building committee that have had really a fist fight over the past couple of years. But the reality is that, you know, we're only going to use those fields for games and maybe one practice a week, because they're not turf fields, they're grass fields, and they're going to get torn up if you use them every single day. So as you start looking at, you know, the logistics of this, if that building were to go, I don't know what fields we would be using going forward. We actually, when this started, you know, started taking a look at where are we going to build our district offices in the event that we have to move out, because we're looking at least 4,500 square feet that you just cannot get commercially here. So, you know, we had talked about the possibility of building something, you know, seeing if we could bond something and build something close to, you know, attached to the Macumber, because there is space over there, and we've done some work to say that we could do that. But we've also got, you know, the campground fields that have not been developed at this point as well. And so, you know, when you take a look at all these contingencies, it's not a surprise that we're struggling in terms of making decisions, because there's a lot of, like, one has to fall into the other. So what I'm trying to do and not, you know, keep this meeting going any longer than I have to, is that, you know, that we've been thinking hard about it. We will not find office space for our district offices. We will have to probably build out somewhere. And so, you know, we're looking at significant costs where we have a building that we are using right now, and I think we're using it successfully. You know, during the pandemic, the Board of Health came in. We used it for vaccine clinics. We used it for COVID testing. We've done pickup of electronics and other, you know, hazardous materials. You know, the Westport basketball has just started coming back last year. So, you know, we're getting a lot of people asking about the building at this point. But, you know, I also understand that there's money that's involved as well. So I didn't mean to go on ad nauseum, but I do want to point out that we thought long and hard about this in terms of how we would go about if the building were gone, and it would be hugely problematic. So.
Well,
I like
So,
to-
thank you. That's extremely helpful because maybe the answer to all this is staring us right in the face is that, as you said, I mean, you need space for administrative offices, you need more playing fields, and you may have the need for more classrooms at some point. It's your student population.
And if I may, Chair Schmidt, two other things. We're absolutely right about the fact that we're looking at adult education. We're going to be meeting with some representatives to see if we can get some seed money privately to start an adult education program, because we have a number of people in Westport who are displaced, are just not happy with the work that they're doing. We feel it's an opportunity. And then the other thing is I've charged my administration with making a proposal for a early childhood center. And that is going to be submitted by December, because as you know, both the Healy administration and the Biden administration have committed funds to early education. And so, we don't want to miss out on that and allow another community or another organization to access that funding that could actually benefit the community. So,
Mr. Chair.
Mark, Manny has something to say.
So Mark, we had a meeting last night, and one of the things that we spoke of, that disadvantaged neighborhood, is what the superintendent was speaking of Macomber, and in need of a well, and work on that well. That neighborhood is one of the neighborhoods that we're looking to loop the water main through. It's probably dead-ended maybe 1,000 feet from the Macomber. So we could run that water main up, come up next to the Cozy Nook where it was stubbed in for the Cozy Nook, come a little bit down Gifford, run down Osborne, and loop it back into Route 6. And that would also help with our residents' time and problems that we're having on the water main. I think before we do any work on your well over at Macomber, we should look into that option. Some of the other communities, some communities that I work in, Somerset and Dayton, they've gotten grants to extend these water mains every year, and they're both doing like $1 million worth of water main every year with a grant. Subcontractor comes in, puts it in. I think before we go for the Macomber, we really need to look into that. And as we discussed last night, the designation, that's one of those neighborhoods that disadvantaged designation. There was a woman, I believe she worked for the school committee, and I don't even want to misquote the price. Right across the street from the Macomber, they just put a denitrification system in. So now that house right there, the Board of Health Title V regulation, she was entitled to do a normal Title V upgrade. I know she spent the extra money on a denitrification system, and the reason why she couldn't do a Title V upgrade is supposed to be, the only reason she'd have to do a denite wasn't an expansion, is she has problems with her well water. That's directly across the street from Macomber. And I want to say that she spent upwards of $45,000. And she's retired, and if you look what's in her backyard, I mean, it's directly across the street. So I mean, we have a need, and we had this discussion last night in the planning board. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm very glad that you came to the meeting.
Yeah. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I think that first of all, I would thank the school superintendent and ask that the superintendent and his offices really sort of think and long and hard, and you see the urgency of this. We need to find a resolution of this building, and if you are in fact the key to all this, you have to do your planning or in your your future planning now, and be in a position to come to us and say, we think we need, or we have a high possibility that we're going to need this building within a certain number of years. That's going to change everything in terms of how we proceed from this point. So with that, and as I said, in the meantime, if Jim Hartnett could and perhaps Manny organize a meeting of the building inspectors to have their opinion. We can discuss all this at our next meeting. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right, so I'd like to have a meeting in 2 weeks, which would be Wednesday, August 23rd at 6 PM. Does that work for everyone?
Is that a Wednesday?
Wednesday, August
I
23rd,
just need to
6.
confirm that the zoning board isn't in here.
I'm sorry?
The zoning board usually meets on Wednesday nights, and I know they have a meeting this month. I'm not sure if it's that date.
Well, can't do it. Yeah.
You can go down the hall.
Little crowded.
So I'm hearing that we can't, you think we can schedule it?
I don't know. I just, I would need to confirm.
And if not, let's see, no, Monday nights don't work because of the select board. And in 2 weeks, the planning board meets on Tuesday nights, so that's why I picked Wednesday, but that may not work.
I can send an email out tomorrow to the committee. We could tentatively schedule it for the 23rd. I'll send out an email.
Okay.
Confirm.
Okay. If hearing nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.